to come out of in camera.
Yeah. You can do that right now.
Your worship, I would move that we come out of in camera at 7:27.
All in favor? Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. And again, as Councillor Mitzner said, to the 8 people who are at home watching, we're starting a bit late tonight. I think her mom is watching tonight, so we apologize. We had a very long in-camera session and it was a very important one. So we have confirmed the agenda, but we do have a housekeeping item. We need to move 3.2, which is to be in the closed meeting, and we'll need to move it after the question and answer period. So if someone could make that motion, or not.
So, your worship, I'm just,
Councillor
for
Peterson.
clarification, we had approved the agenda, so now you're asking for
Moving 3.2 to be after number 7,
to
and
move
it'll
3.2 to 7.1.
right.
I would move that, your worship.
Thank you. You've all heard that motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We have no delegations tonight. We move now to 5.1, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes for September 13th, 2023.
Sure. I move that Council adopt the September 13th, 2023 Community of the Whole meeting minutes as presented in Attachment 1.
Thank you. All in favor? That motion is carried. We move now to business 6.1, the cemetery bylaw update. And Donna, are you speaking to this and presenting? Good evening, Donna, and welcome. You gonna say it?
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. So I'm here to discuss the cemetery bylaw. When people are at a heightened emotional state, even basic day-to-day decisions can feel staggering. Those who are responsible for planning and organizing the end-of-life planning processes are making many difficult decisions during that time. If they have chosen the town of Strathmore Cemetery as their final resting place, our goal is to ensure that their experience is efficient and seamless, not only for the client, but also for administration. The town of Strathmore is the legal owner of and legal responsible party for the entire cemetery. This means we are also responsible for the enforcement of the cemetery bylaw in conformance with the Cemetery Act. And the reality is, it is a business. The last time council discussed the cemetery, from what I understand, was 2014 and then again in 2019. We've accomplished a number of items, and sorry, that 2019 was, I think, with the cemetery master plan, if I recall. So we've accomplished a lot of items that were identified in the master plan, such as having a dedicated person to deal with the affairs of the cemetery. We've implemented a maintenance schedule and operating guidelines. My goal for this evening is that we can have a meaningful discussion about the path forward for the cemetery. I'm confident that updating this bylaw will ensure that administration can continue to find operational efficiencies and strive to be financially sustainable, and that we are following the Cemeteries Act. So I'm just going to go a little bit through the report because I know you guys got it super late. So I'll just kind of go through it a little bit because I don't know if you actually had time to read everything. So how are we meeting the strategic priorities? With regards to community wellness, updating the cemetery bylaw will enable administration to provide an improved experience for those seeking the town of Strathmore as the final resting place. Updating the bylaw will provide the following improvements. It'll allow us focused and efficient administration and maintenance of the cemetery, the ability to provide valuable services and support a respectful, caring, and proficient experience. So right now, the current bylaw is difficult to administer. A clearly defined bylaw will enable staff to have the language to communicate effectively with the clients. Financial stability. Updating the bylaw will enable administration to maintain our existing asset and continue to plan for and manage long-term growth. Updating the bylaw will provide the following improvements: ability to continue conducting inventory efficiencies and continue to explore and improve operational efficiencies through various administrative and operational practices. Ensure protection and consistency of all assets in the cemetery, which will help to ensure costs are sustainable for the town and for clients. ability to continue improving and developing our asset management program with long-term planning and consideration discussions with council through current and future budget processes, and ensuring sustainable business practices by ensuring that we're recovering our costs. So through council support with budgetary items, we were able to bring more services in-house. So for an example, we had an excavator, we just needed the bucket. So we purchased the bucket, and we were basically able to implement safe work practices and procedures. And again, that's through your support of the safety program as well, which I know the staff really appreciate and take a lot of pride that that service was brought in-house, as it was all contracted out before. And also by allowing us to purchase CityWorks, which has enabled us to track costs. Sorry, I just kind of lost my spot there a little bit. So although we do appreciate the contractor's support, now that we're able to conduct those digs, we still do rely on contractors from time to time. Like if we're in the middle of a snow event, we do still use some of that contracted services, but predominantly it's all in-house now. And like I said, with CityWorks, we're able to track our equipment, labor, and materials, and this enables us to effectively track and analyze costs. So with regards to social sustainability, the cemetery not only has a historical connection to the community, it also holds a deep significance for those who have a loved one in the cemetery. The cemetery can be a host for end-of-life events and allows our community to gather and lay wreaths in remembrance of our veterans. It is a place for people to memorialize their loved one and provides a serene environment to place flowers while remembering their loved ones. The cemetery brings comfort to those who have suffered a loss and provides psychological benefits by providing a calming place to disconnect from day-to-day life while they struggle with their grief or to remember their loved one. So the cemetery not only has a connection to the community, but also to the staff who work in the cemetery. The majority of the staff who conduct work in all aspects of the cemetery are local. Many of them are longtime residents. They grew up and went to school here, and on many occasions are prepping burial plots for people they know or have been acquainted with. They have a tremendous amount of pride and care deeply about the cemetery operations. Staff do see the people who come regularly to visit the cemetery. They can see the pain that loved ones are going through, and they do feel sorrow for them. So the cemetery can be a very sensitive area, and changes implemented can possibly be viewed negatively. So as we do implement any changes, all interactions with the public, loved ones, or authorized representatives of the deceased will be conducted with the utmost of respect and care. Administration will also offer assistance through our FCSS team for any person that requires additional support. So I think there'll be some implications. I highlight a few in here of who will be impacted by some of the work. I do believe that the work that will go into this, if this is approved, I think short term, yeah, it'll have a significant increase in some people's workload. There'll be a lot of administrative duties that go along with it, but we're ready for that. We have multiple teams that have been helping out throughout this entire update. So that would include legislative services, communications, operations, FCSS, and one I forgot on here, super important, is finance. They'll also be impacted. But once the changes have stabilized, I think that the changes will be long-term, but with short incremental impacts. So with regards to financial implications, I think more around the future budget impacts is where that would be impacted. I think the current budget's not going to have really any impact on it, but in the long term, we'd like to work towards a cost recovery model, and there could be some capital asset investment requests that pertain to the suggestions from the cemetery master plan. This includes a memorial wall for the unmarked graves. I think they moved some from Kinsman that moved over to the cemetery in the early 1900s, and I don't think and I know there's no headstones or anything, so it was recommended that a memorial wall go up, just listing all the names of the people. We'd like to install some seating. We'd also like to look at maybe putting a map for wayfinding. This would include section markers, so that would allow people when they haven't visited for a long time or maybe haven't been to our cemetery, that they're not just wandering around aimlessly looking for a person that's buried there. And it was suggested to also have a welcome kiosk and interpretive signage that could maybe describe some of the history of the cemetery as well. I'd also like to look at a plan to get water to the site so that we can water the grass. And this one could maybe be way down the road and wasn't part of the master plan, but just something I was thinking of is that maybe eventually we could look at putting a sound wall up along the highway just so that it can get noisy, especially with the big trucks that go by there. The other things I'm thinking of that we could also implement is with the benches would be memorial benches, and then maybe looking at planters that would be memorial planters as well. Sorry, I'll just kind of get my key issues here. So some of the key issues in this bylaw right now is we need clarity of definitions in the bylaw. Another key issue is just with the administration of the bylaw. Talk about expectation of interments and disinterments, clarified some of the language with regards to monuments, and there is unclear expectations with regards to work and construction and maintenance that's being done in the cemetery, not only by others, but also by the town. And it also outlines some expectations of visitors to the cemetery and liability, and then eventually, I think next week will be cost recovery, if I recall. And I just would like to mention as well that before we start going through the bylaw, that the legal team did look at the bylaw as well. So some of those legalities that are in there are from the lawyers. And then I have a few discussion points that I would like to go through, and we could maybe go through the bylaw first and then go through the discussion points is what I was thinking. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and I'll capture some of the major changes and the reasons for why they were changed. And I also will tell you that there's a few things in there, and again, I know if you probably may not have had time to do an analysis on my work, but I did the old cemetery bylaw and this one, this red line version. When I made changes, the lawyer had accepted the changes, so I had to add stuff, and when I tried to remove it, it was messing with the formatting. So if you did analyze it and you're like, this wasn't in the old bylaw, that's why I kept it, so that the formatting would not be bouncy and awful. Okay, so one of the...
Sorry, Donna, Councillor Wiley?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask a confidentiality a question. So the email I got this afternoon with this in it said confidential, but is this now on our website? Is this public?
Thank you, Worship Council. This document, this RFD, because it's a public portion of the agenda, it is a public document.
So this is now online. So any questions I asked that I read this afternoon in my email, I can
On the
ask
spot.
in public. None
Yeah,
of this is in
absolutely.
camera now. This is all the
All public?
information I received is now public.
Absolutely. It's not on the website yet, but it is a public document as it's being discussed in a public
Okay.
meeting.
I just needed to know that before we
Yeah,
get to
no problem.
questions.
And if you do have questions, just interrupt me, because we're going to go through a lot of information probably, so it might be easier just that way to do it like that. Okay, so one of the first things that I did change in there is I just kind of softened some language and stopped using the word control. I used administration because really that's what we're trying to do, is administer the bylaw, not control the bylaw. Basically, there was kind of no definitions for like people that, for the next of kin. So we used authorized representative as anybody who is a plot owner, or if the person is deceased, that they have the right to control interment rights for a purchase plot in the order of the priority as outlined in the Cemeteries Act. And sorry, there's one more thing I want to mention before we start actually going through this. All the measurements are in feet. And the reason that everything's not in metric is because industry standard is in feet and inches. So I kept everything with the industry standard for ease of anybody that would be looking at the bylaw for direction of monuments or if they're purchasing plots or anything like that. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And so under the red line version where it says burial, the reason this one was removed is we don't lower vaults, caskets, or cremation urns. We only open and close. And burial will be defined more in the work end of things as opposed to this, because we don't do that. It's the funeral homes and that do that work. We just clearly defined what size, what a burial plot is and what the sizing is. The other one we clearly defined is business days. So right now what happens is that people can contact us on, as the requirement right now is 72 hours notice. So what happens is that somebody can contact us on a Friday and have their burial on a Monday. And so because we don't work Saturdays and Sundays, it ends up being overtime charges. And because they may have to come in. If we got stuff on the Friday, we get the notice on the Friday, we're already in our work plan, maybe just can't implement somebody to go, especially if it's a casket burial or a double depth vault. There's a lot that goes into those. And also, depending where it is, because there's some pretty tight spaces in the cemetery that take a little bit longer. And the last thing we want to be doing is digging a casket burial on the day of the burial. You don't want any equipment, you want people around there. So we needed to clearly define that because there's been times that it's been a little bit of a struggle. And the other thing we're also gonna, and this is one error of mine, under cemetery coordinator, we're actually gonna change that to persons, in apostrophe with the S, because there's multiple people that do coordinate cemetery operations. So it just kind of leaves that to myself and Ledge Services as well. And just a little bit of formatting on some of the other stuff. There was no definition for a columbarium, so we defined that. Did a little bit more of especially around the authorized removal of dead human remains and disinterment. Family representative, that was one of those ones that I just told you about that I added that, the lawyer removed, and I didn't want to mess up the formatting, so that didn't matter. Field of honor, there was no definition for field of honor, which we do have a special spot for veterans in the cemetery, so we just wanted to define that. Another common monument that's in the cemetery is a flat grave marker, so we just wanted to define that and give guidance to people who would like to use those. While I was going through this, I also noticed that I kind of had two definitions for foundation and base that were exactly the same. So I'm going to remove foundation from this bylaw and just call it a base, and I'll remove that so that's clear and it's not a kind of a duplicate. And then a grave decoration. Grave decoration means anything that's placed on a plot or columbarium for a memorial service. Grave plot we removed because it was redundant with the burial plot. And define the sinking of a grave. Grave subsidence is the professional way to say that a grave is sinking. The other one is the holiday, so I just wanted to clearly define that with regards to notifications. Immediate family was not part of the old bylaw. Internment rights, just more language that we needed just with regards to administering the bylaw. And then the monument. One thing we've changed in this one is the sizing. As you'll see, I've crossed out 2 feet 4 inches. That does not meet industry standard. And so what was happening is that clients, if they wanted the maximum size of monument, they had to custom make a monument. So by changing that just a little bit, it allows them to buy basically what's in stock as opposed to custom building. Non-residents, that one we might keep eventually, possibly, so I'm going to come back to that one. That's kind of one of my discussion questions with you. And then plot was just, simple way to basically double depth, cremation, niche, the burial plot, just an easy way to encompass all of them. Right certificate was another one we needed to change, as it used to be a deed. It is no longer a deed. It is now a right certificate. So this enables administration to change that certificate now. And we might keep service area, but depends on our discussion. And then I just clearly defined what a vehicle means and a veteran. And then the rules of interpretation were all legal from the lawyer, and if you had any comments or questions on that one, I'd be happy to answer those. Okay, so the administration. Again, just clearly defines expectations of going through the process of burying somebody at the cemetery. We also added some language around 5.3. Thank you. So the town may, by agreement with a society, church, or other organization, reserve a section of the cemetery to be used exclusively for the interment of deceased members of the society, church, or organization. Just put some language in the next one just to be in accordance with the Cemeteries Act. Okay, anything that was in, I'm down at 5.9. Anything that you saw in green is still in the bylaw. It was just moved to a different location. So if it was crossed out, it was removed from that section and is placed elsewhere where you'll see it in green without the crossout in it. One thing we also added was just about people doing work in the cemetery with construction, erecting of monuments, foundations, the columbarium, niche covers, or doing any work in the cemetery, whether they're employed by the town or not, that they're subject to policies and procedures put in place by the town with respect to work going on in the cemetery. So the contractors would have to do a pre-qualification. In the case that maybe somebody wants to have a stone put in, they want to do it themselves, then we would just go through our safe work practices and procedures and do an orientation with them and get a plan for what their installation looks like. And then just clearly define that if anybody deems a previously purchased plot unusable, the town will supply a similar plot at no additional cost to the rights holder, and the original plot shall revert to the town.
Sorry, Deb.
So is that a problem? Like, do we have some previously purchased plots that aren't usable?
It can happen, because what's happened is that in the past, there was people that bought multiple plots, and what's happened over time is that the size of people has changed as well as the casket size has changed. So sometimes when we've got people in the ground, that because it's gotten wider, it takes up that space, and you may not be able to fit a casket in that space. So yes, that could happen. And number 5.13, the authorized representatives shall keep their records up to date with the town. So if we do any type of cleanup, or if there's damaged monuments or whatever, we're just asking that people keep us up to date so we can contact them. Okay, so interments, just kind of clearly defining the steps they have to take for an interment. And just talks about, like, you have to be the registered right holder of that plot, etc. And then we talk again about just the time of 72 hours, which I alluded to earlier in the definitions. And the notification time does not include weekends or holidays.
Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. Hi, Donna. For number 6.2, is there like an information package that the town has that like Because I have to imagine like somebody might not, know where to kind of get all these things lined up. So do we have a document that we could provide people or? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, thank you.
Do we have lighting at the cemetery? Like, can people go after the sun goes down without a flashlight? No?
No. There's only street lighting in the cemetery right now, and we have, in this bylaw, also said that visitors can go from 8:30 a.m. to sunset to visit the cemetery.
Councillor Wiley.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the time restriction. Is that because there's been a crime problem at the cemetery, or is that just because of the safety?
I'd say a little bit of both, actually. So there has been some vandalism that has occurred at the cemetery, and then also for safety, especially with those flat markers, that sort of thing, if somebody trips over it, I mean, we have language in here that would take away liability for that, but, I mean, we don't want somebody to trip and hurt themselves, and or worst case scenario, like anytime we dig a casket, we cover it, but like if somebody messes around in there, that could be a problem. Okay, so there's one error that I made as well in the crossed out section of 5.4, so just under 6.6. I actually need to add that back in. I crossed it out and I shouldn't have. So basically what it is going to say is maximum of 1 cremation burial per plot shall be allowed in each cremation plot.
Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions, but I'll catch up as we go along. So one of my questions is there an expiry period for an unclaimed plot? So say someone has purchased a plot many years ago, we can't track them down or any of their authorized representatives. What would happen in that case?
No, there is not.
Is that something we've considered or has been an issue in the past?
That's a good question. I don't think so. Not to my knowledge, I don't think there's been an issue with that in the past.
Okay, my thoughts are, just for efficiency of space, if you have, some empty spots that are claimed, but no, they've been claimed since, say, 1950. And,
well, that is kind of one of my discussion points as well, Councillor Langmaid. Like, we could talk about it now if you like, about that we'd like to discuss if we want to restrict the amount of plots that people can buy. For that reason, too, would be an optimal reason not to allow to put a cap on it. Sorry,
okay, and then I'll ask one more question now, if that's okay, and that's that one thing I've become kind of aware of is that people who pass away who are medically categorized as morbidly obese can require a larger plot than typical. And I'm wondering, in that case, would they have to purchase 2 plots? Would we just maybe find a larger plot that could accommodate someone of that size? What would that situation look like?
It's a good question. I don't think there's different rates for that, but I think they would probably end up having to buy 2 plots.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I removed 5.6, or sorry, let me go back there to the cremation. I think that one was already in there about the 6 cremation urns and the 1 casket. And then we just put, which is industry standard, maximum of 2 cremation urns allowed in a single niche. That is industry standard. No burials shall be permitted in the cemetery that have got that crossed out. This is covered under the definition of burial permit. 6.11. So the interments, the opening of the interments will be done by staff. The closing, we haven't put a definition of who can close of staff, because there are some people that actually like to put the dirt on the casket or the cremation area themselves. but nobody can go and just dig in the cemetery and put somebody in there. The other thing we do not allow is the scattering of remains in the cemetery, as we do not have a scattering garden. So this one, the next one we beefed up quite a bit here is disinterment. This one, not that we get a lot of these, but we have had them and they are challenging. So sorry, just let me get to my spot because I scrolled and.
Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you. I actually have a question about the scatter plot. So when I was reading the cemetery master plan, it did discuss that a scatter plot was something people expressed interest in.
Yes.
And then it also kind of discussed the options of green burials, which are becoming more popular, but still a very small number. Have we considered any plans on expanding the level of service at our cemetery to permit these activities?
We have. I think we would then have to expand into the expansion area to the west of the existing cemetery to do that. There's really no space there to do a scattering garden, basically, and same with the green burials.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so disinterments need to be authorized, obviously, before we do any type of disinterment. And yeah, just a lot of rules around, and this again is a lot of legal, just around authorized representatives and instructions on what to do. But for my end of things, is the removal of the actual casket. So that, again, as I mentioned earlier, we don't do that. That is up to the funeral home to bring all the devices that they need to get the casket out of the ground or the person out of the ground. The only thing that we will do is dig to the depth of the concrete liner, vault, casket, or the urn. If there isn't one, then if shoring is required, we'd like to have a fee for that as well. And we also do not permit our staff to enter into the plots for safety reasons. And we also put a restriction on when a disinterment can be done. The last disinterment we did was in the winter time, and it was messy. It caused damage to the adjacent graves, and that's not what we want, right? Like, they try to make it as easy as possible and tidy as possible. So we just put some timelines on when we would actually do disinterments, and that is also industry standard as well.
Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you. The only question I have here is looking at the bylaw here in point 7.1, it says disinterment must be authorized by the owner of the rights certificate or the authorized representative. My question is, I realize this would be an extreme circumstance, but should the RCMP require the disinterment of someone who has been interred at our ceremony? Would they be considered an authorized representative, or would we need to go with the family? Would their warrant or something else be appropriate?
I don't know if it's necessarily the RCMP, but it can be court ordered, which I think the RCMP
Okay, and
would
that
set for that.
Okay, and that would be, as long as we got that court order or whatnot,
Yeah,
even though they're not necessarily the authorized representative
exactly. Yes,
as defined in
correct.
our bylaw, it would be permitted.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so the installation of monuments, markers, and niche covers. Again, we're just more definitions added in there, as well as notification for installation of the monuments. And then just one thing we've ran into a few times is people that have damaged monuments that want the town to fix them, when actually it is the responsibility of the authorized representative of the person. The other thing that I had mentioned, we then talked about the sizing of the monuments, which is nice and clearly defined in there. And then also in the case of a cremated interment, that there are placed within a full-size plot. One flat grave marker may be placed within the boundaries of the plot and must be level with the ground. And then cremation plot, same thing, just a little bit extra added in there for the guidance for people putting the monuments in. And also put timelines of when they can come in and do that work. And again, just talking about the responsibility of the monument. So this one is one that we want to discuss with you as well. So 8.7, the town of Strathmore will make reasonable efforts to provide written notice to the authorized representative of any disrepair of markers or monuments that pose a safety risk. The authorized representative will be provided 30 days to contact the town with a repair, removal, or replacement plan. If no contact is made, the town will remove the unsafe marker or monument and will hold it for 1 additional month. If no contact is made, the expiry of 1 month of the removal, the town will dispose of the monument or marker. We have to remove the unsafe items because they do pose a safety risk, so we felt that that needed to be added in there.
Councillor Peterson?
Thanks, Donna. So, does the town carry insurance, so in the case of vandalism?
I would imagine, yeah. Yes.
So there
Yes.
might be a shift on that then, if it was vandalism that
Yes.
caused that.
You want to talk to?
Good evening. Hi. We do have a crime policy under our insurance package that would cover vandalism, yes.
Thanks. And then just to follow up in terms of removing, so prior to, I think it was 1956, when they were laying the slabs that cover the grave sites, a lot of those caved,
Yeah.
broke. So you would remove those, but what would you replace them with?
Grass.
So you just dirt and
Yeah.
grass over the
Yeah,
top?
we
Good.
top dress them and overseed,
Yeah.
basically, yeah.
Thanks.
Which is actually my next point on in there as well, that we no longer allow those grave covers, the cement grave covers. So any that do become in disrepair that are unsafe, essentially the responsibility is of the authorized owner of the authorized representative to remove it. But in some cases, if we can't find them, we're just going to do it, right, and make sure that the area is safe. Okay, and then again, I changed the title of this one. Again, just took that word control out and called it maintenance, planting, construction, and work. So the town will act in a respectful manner when conducting all maintenance, planting, construction, and work in the cemetery, and no disrespect is intended to facilitate these activities. As I mentioned to you, that there is times that we have to, that we may run over a grave doing another dig for somebody. When that's finished, as soon as time allows, in particular with winter, as soon as spring happens, we're in there filling in ruts, we'll seed, we water, that sort of thing to establish that grave back to its state that it was in before. And then we're also responsible for mitigating the grave subsidence, which is the grave sinking. And that can take up to 1 year. A lot of people, when they inter their loved ones, they kind of have an expectation that it should be grass right away, but there is some sinking that occurs, and so it's best to just give it its time, let it do its sink, and then we keep topping it up. We just don't do the grass seed on top of it right away because it ends up getting covered with more dirt and that sort of thing. Usually too much dirt to actually let that grass grow that we planted. Okay, and then we go through the kind of the list of what that we're responsible for. So seeding, grave surface, reseeding, any cultivation that's necessary in connection with such seeding and reseeding, watering, the seasonal cutting of the grass and the weeds. We keep the grave plots in neat condition, the burial plots in good condition and appearance, and any other work that's authorized by myself or the cemetery coordinators. And then The other thing that we'd like to include in there as well is just around flowers that are left at the time of interment. So minimum 1 week, because usually they desiccate within that time, and then they end up blowing all over the place and that sort of thing. So we just want to be able to clean those up. And then any other items that have subject to decomposition. And then if there is anything that we do remove that isn't really a flower or something, like the intention is that when we remove things, not to just dispose of them, we'll hang on to them in case somebody wants them back, right? Because some people put a flower on there, they may possibly want that flower back, but I would hope they would just come retrieve it. And then we want to beef this up to that if anything is prohibited, that we can remove the item if it poses a safety hazard, becomes unsightly, can impede maintenance of operations, or pose a safety risk to visitors, authorized representatives, or staff without notice. Just talked about like where vehicles are allowed to drive in the cemetery, the speed they should be maintaining. We lowered that a little bit because the cemetery road's pretty small, and even 20 is a little bit too fast for the vehicles in there. And then we're also responsible for clearing the roads. We've got that as a P3 on our snow clearing policy. And just to let people know that we do clear the snow, and sometimes you have to put windrows and they may end up on graves from time to time, and we'll avoid that where possible, but sometimes it is unavoidable. And that will, in the winter, we do clear snow for any interment. And again, we'll try to avoid putting snow on other people's plots as best as possible when we are opening it up for somebody. But we will not clear for visitation. And yeah, that we might just have to drive on them. We spoke about that. And that sometimes on the very, very odd occasion, we've had to move a monument to access a plot. We'll avoid that as all possible, but we'll make sure it gets put back to where it was put. And I think I'm missing something here. I know where it is. Okay. And then anything that we do is damage due to our negligence, we would obviously remove. Okay, Field of Honor. A few little changes to that one, just again around just applying to be buried in the Field of Honor, just really clear for the person who's putting the application in. Sale of plots. So number 11.4. I made a mistake on this one, and this one does need to, the wording does need to change. So the intention is that plots can only be sold back to the town, and that would be at 85% of the current market value as regulations in the Cemeteries Act. So this ensures that plots are not sold on bidding wars and Kijiji, and also ensures that we have accurate record keeping. That's a good question. Is it transferable? With approvals. Pre-purchase, that one is, again, just changing a little bit of the language in that one, so we won't go through that one a whole lot. Another one that we beefed up quite substantially is visitation. So just directing people that when they are in the cemetery, if they are driving their own vehicle, any damages that they do in the cemetery, if any at all, that is actually their responsibility to repair it. And that the town isn't responsible for lost, stolen, or damaged memorial tributes, and we have no responsibility of the care of the memorial tributes. It's the cemetery is a public place, and so it actually is recommended not to place memorial tributes because, again, we can't be there all the time to police what people are doing. So things do go missing, and it has been a little bit problematic for us because they think it was us that took the stuff, but it wasn't. We, like, really, we don't remove anything from the cemetery at this point.
Donna, sorry, thank you. So with, like, you know, there's obviously a number of graves that have bunch of stuff around them. So are we going to be removing that stuff going forward?
That's what I'm going to get to right now. That's
Okay.
this is where this conversation's going right now.
Okay. And are you going to talk about, I guess, like, are we notifying the okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so just wanted to clarify that nobody can bury an animal in the cemetery. And then also that animals aren't allowed in the cemetery with exception to service dogs. And then, okay, so 13.12. This is some of the photos that you have in the handout that was given to you earlier. So in this section, we would like to amp this up to say, no person shall erect, construct, or place upon or around a plot or in any part of the cemetery any foundations, full or partial cement grave covers, curbs, fences, railings, walls, copings, coping stones, curbs, trellises, statues, benches, oversized decorations such as crosses, large plaques, etc., glass objects, so that includes glass encased wreaths, stands, holders, bases, receptacles, jars, bottles, pots, ceramic objects, china, lawn ornaments, toys, metal objects, lights, permanent plantings, permanent structures, or any other structures or objects that may pose a danger or safety hazard. So the pictures I gave you earlier show a lot of lights and decorations that are just placed around the plot. And as I mentioned earlier, that a lot of my staff have a connection to the cemetery. And so when they go and do the maintenance, they're not just like, they see these decorations and they don't go and just weed whip everything. A lot of the time what happens is they remove those lights because they're super sensitive. As soon as you weed whip them, they break, they shatter. So when ends up this taking a long time to maintain the cemetery for that reason, when normally when you maintain a cemetery with a lawnmower weed whip, it's usually a straight cut and just, you know, pretty easy weed whipping and that sort of thing, right? And then we also have some locations that some of the people, the loved ones, are encroaching onto other people's graves as well. And that's a bit of a problem as well, especially if the plot is currently empty. And then when we go to bury somebody in there, that could be a little challenging as well. So we'd like to put some restrictions on what's allowed in the cemetery. And our plan is, what we'd like to do with that is we have an extensive communication plan that we've been working on. So the communication team, I think they're coming next week with that plan. I've seen it, it's fantastic, but it would be a year-long communications, right? It would give time for people to process the changes that we're asking them to make at the cemetery with regards to the memorialization of their loved one. And then, like I'd mentioned earlier in my presentation, that if anybody is struggling and they request help, we can offer that help, because I know it will be difficult for some people, right? But what we would like to allow is, like, as you see there's one, I don't have my presentation of the slides open, but there, I think it's the second last picture on there. Do you mind if I come look quickly, just so I can tell you? Here. Okay, so the second last picture does have some items that are done properly. They're placed on the ribbon, on the monument. It's a base type of thing that you can still easily maintain around that monument. So there's some things done right in that picture, a couple things wrong. I think there's some metal objects that are just placed in the grass. That's the kind of things we don't want. But the things that are affixed to the monument or the ribbon, absolutely.
I have a question about
Yes.
that. Is there any option to say for 13.12 that it could be, if these items are there, then, you know, regular yard maintenance cannot occur, instead of just forbidding it outright? Is there a way to relax that, or is there a way to say within 12 months of the burial? Like, does it have to be so black and white, or is there a way to sort of soften that one.
I think there's a way we could soften that. Like if you, I'd absolutely would consider a timeline that they could put memorial tributes as long as they aren't safety issues, right? Like if they do break or anything like that, then we do have to deal with it because like broken glass and that sort
So
of
we could
thing,
say
right?
something like, as long as there's not a safety concern within 12 months of the burial, tributes will exist. After that, regular maintenance may not occur.
Yeah, that would be fair, I think. I think most of them are pretty strict with their rules, to be honest. I think most of them, like they're removed right away. There's no kind of,
That happens in Canmore. We just did an
Yeah.
internment and we were told by the funeral person that they're taken away.
yeah, yeah.
So that was just my opinion. I don't know how the rest of council feels about that.
Okay. Okay, so then the other thing we just moved in there was just that people cannot plant trees, shrubs, hedges, grass, or flowers. I mentioned to you earlier, we had some ideas because there are some people that actually have planted gardens and stuff. So that was the thought around the memorial planters, that if they did want to, they could plant flowers in a proper location, so then we can actually do the maintenance still. The other one in 13.5, so no person shall care for or cultivate any plot without the consent of the cemetery coordinator. So this one still allows that if somebody, because we do have people that like actually bring water every day and water the plot and that sort of thing. So this still allows them that if they did want to, they could just come to us, ask for permission, yes, go ahead type of thing, depending what the situation is, of course. And then just clarity around not tying or hanging things on trees, bushes, benches, or in around the plots and other locations in the cemetery. We've had a few problems with that. Also, similarly, don't remove anything of the trees, plants, or flowers. And nobody, sorry, just let me get there, shall remove any object erected, maintained, planted, or placed in the cemetery with exception to those employed by the town or under the direction of the town. And then the last is just the removal of the memorial fences, the memorial tributes if they are deemed offensive. And then we added some offenses and penalties in there. And that's all I've changed so far.
Thank you, Donna. Councillor Peterson and then Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Worship. Exhaustive work. It's a big undertaking.
Yes,
I,
it was. Understatement.
I just had to fill in for Claudette because she's not doing it. In terms of the interpretive signage and the project, just a suggestion. When I was a principal previously in a former school, we did that in independent projects for credits. Kids undertook under supervision to map a graveyard and create an interpretive map box and then signs for specific areas of the graveyard. It was a year-long project for several
Okay.
kids that bear fruit on their side. You know, they were
Yeah.
able to get some really good experience. The second thing is that on the edge of the apartment buildings directly across, there is an irrigation spigot. I'm sure
Yes,
you're
there
aware of
is.
that.
Yes, yeah. I have some other ideas though, so.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I just
yeah.
at one time the owner or the developer of that had given the town some options to use it
Yeah.
and it was open to
I
it.
spoke to the developer that had that line
Yeah.
installed and he
Yeah.
did tell me where that
Right.
terminates
Yeah.
and yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then the third thing I had was related to it's becoming more common now than it has been in future years that groups of certain religious communities that require burial within a 24 to 48-hour period are starting to access graveyards that aren't specific to their their faith group. And I'm wondering if there's been any consideration of that, because I know that there would be additional costs, but it's, you know, we talk in our strategic plan about inclusionary practice into the future, and I know that this will be challenging, and I don't expect or need an answer today, but I know that in our Muslim community, they like to intern their dead within 24 to 48 hours, and they don't use caskets generally
Right.
for internment. And so it's a consideration going forward as we seek to become more inclusive.
Well, we can absolutely look at including something, language like that, that, you know, that there could be exceptions made from the cemetery coordinator, so that would
Well,
enable.
it probably
our-
will be an addendum at some point. That's
Yeah.
what I anticipate. It
Okay.
hasn't happened yet, I know.
Yeah.
But it'll probably be an addendum, and I know
Yeah.
you'll deal with it. But I really appreciate this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you for all your work on this. The presentation started with a statement that I think might surprise some people in Strathmore, and it was just that we, the municipality, are the sole managers of the cemetery. There's a long history that goes back with the Roman Catholic Diocese. I was wondering if there's any on administration that just wanted to give like a little backgrounder on why it is that the municipality is the sole manager of.
That's as per the Cemeteries Act, is why that's in there, I think, right? Yeah. Who wants to?
What Councillor Wiley's referencing, I think, if I...
Yeah, I
if
just
I'm
wondered
right,
if someone wanted to go back to the 1975 agreement between the,
That's
if
what he's
anyone
talking
wants to
about,
talk.
yeah.
It's now on our public agenda, so I thought maybe it should just be mentioned for the people watching. It's the last appendix. I mean, I'd be happy to do it. I just think for anyone watching at home that's, okay, sure, I'll tackle it. So in 1975, the Roman Catholic Diocese sold the property for $1 to the town of Strathmore. The understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that 75 burial spots would be reserved for the Catholic Diocese. And so I think we're probably almost at that capacity. I think probably 75 burials have occurred, but is that number come in yet, or are there?
So on behalf of administration, we are planning to bring a detailed report actually to the October 18th regarding that particular matter. So I don't have the numbers right in front of me. So
Long
they
and
will
the
be coming
short
forward.
is, I just want to let everyone rest assured, if they are taking a look at this agenda, that section 5.3, if we want to scroll back to 5.3, I think that in my reading of that is that opens it up to any church or any parish that wants to sit down with administration and work out a place where, and I think I'm quoting here, where there'd be exclusive burial rights for that section. That can be a practice that continues into the future. So it's not as though this has put up some kind of a wall. It's just a matter of, okay, so those were the deals that were made in the past, and now we're looking forward to come up with a situation. 5.3 allows that to happen.
You're correct.
And so I guess my question is, am I reading 5.3 correctly? That sets up a situation where the Roman Catholic parish could set up a place where there's exclusive burial rights to a section.
You are reading that correctly.
All right, then that's a lot of words to just get a yes answer. Thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
If I could just follow up on that, on the master plan update on page 33, that's where it's outlining the actual availability of
Yes,
plots, right?
that's correct, yes.
Just a fantastic work on this, thanks.
Okay, so just one last little discussion that I told you I had a few points I wanted to bring up. And this is going to bring us forward to the fees bylaw that's going to be coming up as well. So is there an appetite to have a different fee and definition for a child and adult? So I will tell you that it is a different preparation for a child compared to an adult, and at least half the cost for opening and closing for a child compares to an adult. So if you guys would like, we could definitely separate the two, or, because I think right now it's just one.
Councillor Wiley.
Yeah, so you just said it's about half the cost from
For
the
a child.
administration perspective. Also, just on a sensitivity perspective, and moreover, families that lose a child likely don't have an insurance policy on the child. So then the cost is already so much more of a burden.
Yeah.
So if it's less cost for us, I definitely have an appetite.
Okay,
I fully agree with that. Councillor Peterson.
Same.
Okay, perfect. Another discussion is around resident and non-resident. At the very beginning of the definitions, you saw that I included that I probably maybe changed some of the language around that. So I would say about 75% of the municipalities that we studied with regards to fees do have a separation of resident and non-resident. Definitions vary. I do have some here that I could read to you, or would you just like administration to maybe have those two separate and have two different fees and definitions for resident and non-resident?
When we say like non-resident, we mean somebody who is like not currently living in the town and hasn't lived in the town before?
Well, and that's where the definition would come in. So we could do something, I'll just, if it's okay, I'm just going to read like what Canmore and Lacombe have the same definition of a resident. Means a person who resides within the town of Canmore at the time of their demise, or B, at the time they make the application to purchase a plot or a niche. Or number 2, who owns a property within the town corporate limits or is the current spouse or dependent child of a person who owns a property in the town, A, at the time of their demise, or B, at the time they make an application to purchase a plot or a niche. Or 3, who previously resided or owned property within the town corporate limits for a period of not less than 15 consecutive years. A person meeting this criterion may apply to purchase a plot or a niche at the resident rate provided a properly executed affidavit of residency is submitted at the time of purchase. Regis Sylvan Lakes as well will mean a person who has normally resided in the town and has resided in the town immediately preceding his or her death or his or her application to make a purchase. So varies on really simple definition, or it could be elaborate like Canmore and Lacombe.
I don't personally think it's unreasonable to have a different fee for somebody who is non-resident. I mean, like what counts as non-resident, I think is debatable. I wouldn't want to be too strict, but I wouldn't want to just, have somebody who's never lived here and, get buried here or something like
Right.
that. So, but yeah, thank you.
Yep.
And someone from the county or outside, if they're living in the lodge, they would be considered residents, wouldn't they, if they?
Well, my original definition that I had in there was of a person who is within the boundaries of the town of Strathmore, a current property owner with the service area or has lived within the service area and currently resides elsewhere, and the service area being the town of Strathmore or Wheatland County.
Okay, thank you.
So what I could do is I could add this in there, and then when I come back for actual readings of it, then you could maybe discuss it at that time if you like. Okay, my last one that I want to ask you, and we kind of talked about this one a little bit earlier, was would you like a cap on how many plots can be pre-purchased? So we did a pros and cons list. So a cap would provide greater ease of administration over the cemetery and will reduce how long a plot sits vacant, which Councillor Langmaid had asked about earlier. As I mentioned as well, the casket urns and equipment do change size, which can lead to a lack of space when it comes time for interment. In the past, the plots were sold in a 10 by 10 square, which included 3 burial plots. Now the size is a 12 by 10, so that just shows you that the size has changed over time. The other issue, the other thing that would happen if we do cap is that access points are available. The cons would be that if capping would cause challenges for large families who maybe want to purchase multiple plots and be in the same area together, that maybe people aren't going to pass away for quite some time. So that would be a challenge. And if we don't cap, then we potentially would have financial losses because we sold multiple plots at today's prices. And then if we don't cap, the access points can be more difficult as the cemetery fills up, and then it results on us just driving on more of those plots.
Councillor Montgomery.
So, like, I do take the point about, I think it's good that we allow people to kind of group themselves together. I mean, like, I had this idea that maybe we could, so let's say somebody buys like and I don't know what we should cap it at, like it's kind of, you know, depends
We
on
would
the
do some research on that. I just wanted to see if the appetite was there to cap it or not. And then we could do we've done a lot of research with different municipalities with regards to fees and everything like that. So we could do the same thing with capping.
Could we do something where like people could buy a plot, you know, like let's say today, and then, you know, like let's say they don't use it for 60 years, you know, would it be unreasonable to, you know, then kind of charge them whatever the going rate is minus whatever they paid now in the 60 years? Like, so if it's, you know, double, then they just pay a bit more for that plot?
That's a good question. I'd have to actually divert that to more like the legal end of things, if that would be allowed. They would pay the going rate for an opening and closing, like hopefully 60 years from now, the fees will change and be, you know, with the times type of thing. So they would still be paying those costs. But as far as, you know, if the land is more valuable of, you know, supplementing that, I'm not sure if we could do that or not. I'd have to defer that to a legal question.
Because that might just like prevent, like, I don't want to call them speculators, but you know, it's like if I can get in now for $400 instead
Yeah.
of triple, or you know, so. but-
We have that right now. I will tell you that we
Yeah.
have had people approached to buy like 100 plots and that sort of thing. So, yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Any other
yeah,
questions?
if there's people coming to buy 100 plots, then probably we want to have a cap. I thought
Yeah.
you were talking about like 6 plots or something.
No,
Okay,
there's
okay.
been requests for it. Ample.
maybe okay, so maybe then we want to consider
Okay.
capping.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I do have a question about how deep are the double burial ones?
They are, if I recall, 8 to 10 feet deep.
Oh,
So you have to fit 2 caskets, I'm sorry, you have to fit 2 caskets on top of each other. So probably even more than that, probably 12, 14 feet.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Donna, for your presentation and being willing to
you.
answer all those questions.
No problem. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Langmaid.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you can see me or not. I just to make my comment, and then I have 2 comments. One is that I would be interested in some sort of either cap or perhaps an expiry period if, you know, say a plot has been owned for a very long time and we can't make contact with an authorized representative, and there's no trail to follow up on ownership, whether we can you know, make best use of those points. And as for maybe a restriction on the number of plots purchased, maybe it's tied to number of immediate family members or something. I have no problem with people buying them early. I think it's actually really smart to do your funeral planning ahead of time. I think it makes it easier on your loved ones at the end when they know what you want, and it helps save costs if you know where you're going. But I think my final comment on this today is just that graveyards are really important historical monuments and can be a really important source of information for people who are looking to reconnect with their family roots. So I just ask that we consider when we're keeping our records for the graveyard, and including especially any records of monuments that have been damaged and removed, that we make every effort possible to keep documentation of that. That way, if someone in the future does come forward, we can at least give a package of the information that we do have, maybe even including a photo of that monument if it's been damaged and removed. If that's possible, I don't know, but it would be nice. As an amateur genealogist, I wish a lot of graveyards had that policy 100 years ago. Thank you. Those are my only comments for today.
I will say
Excellent work.
that's actually our intention when we remove things, is that when I said about the workloads of people, that is part of that, right? Is the actual documentation of things that were removed. So if somebody does come to us, that we will have a storage space for things. We're already making plans of where those things would go and how we would document those items and how they would be labeled, that sort of thing, right? So want to deal with this respectfully, not just like, you know, stacking things in a sea can and, you know, I know, but just as respectful
Absolutely,
as
like we're
possible.
hearing all the awful stories on the news. No, I can see through the amount of work that you've put into this bylaw that there is a lot of care and compassion for both for the deceased and for the families who are there memorializing their families. So I really appreciate the amount of thought and effort that's been put into this, and I think we're on the right track, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you again, Donna. We move now to 6.2, options to mitigate noise at Pavilion parking lot and speeding on Park Lane Drive.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to give a short, I don't have a presentation tonight. Would ask that we could bring up the figure that was in your report, though, for reference, but I'll just go through some speaking points before we get into that. So a delegation before Council spoke about their concerns around noise and speeding on Park Lane Drive, as well as noise, garbage, and vandalism at the Pavilion parking lot near Kinsman Park. Council did pass a motion asking staff to bring forward a report outlining options that could help to mitigate some of the issues that were raised. Since that time, staff have installed some traffic counters at 2 locations on Park Lane Drive, both 50 meters east and 40 meters west of Park Lane Way. And we did that, I believe, the last week of September to kind of monitor traffic. The data return showed that most vehicles are traveling actually below the posted speed limit. There was a couple that were quite high. But for the most part, people are traveling the speed limit there, which was what we expected. The table in the report also outlines some options that could mitigate those few speeders on that section of the street. We did rate them in terms of cost effectiveness versus actually their effect on speeding. The data that we did get doesn't support kind of the installation of any changes from a capital perspective. That being said, we did want to present some options before council. So one option we're thinking might make the most sense from a cost perspective is some, I'd say, temporary and I'd say limited road narrowing along a section of Park Lane Drive with both paint and perhaps some temporary cast, I call them biscuits, probably not the right term. Ethan's probably shaking his head. But you've seen them in Calgary. They're kind of short. They're about this tall. They're yellow. They're cast concrete. You can move them around. They have posts in them sometimes. So we could use those to kind of narrow that road along with some paint at certain spots, perhaps a crosswalk from Lambert Park. That's an option. An extreme option could be speed bumps as well. Those are quite expensive and create some operational challenges as well. And as well, they do penalize every driver for the bad behavior of a few, unfortunately. The other item I'd like to raise is that even if we did reduce speeds, the few speeders we have, then it wouldn't necessarily solve the noise issue. A lot of stock vehicles today have mufflers or don't have mufflers that if you accelerate a certain way, you're going to hear the noise. So we could fix the speed issue, but wouldn't necessarily fix the noise issues that we're hearing about. The other piece that we could do along there is increased focused enforcement measures along with some physical changes on the street, certain times of the day or the year. And Staff Sergeant Wygosh is here. If you want to ask him some questions of what that might look like, of course, there is operational impacts in terms of budget as well. So that's another thing we could look at. The nice part about that is it's flexible and scalable depending on what the issue is. And hopefully if we do, I'll say, crack down a few times, behavior would be changed, hopefully permanently. So in terms of the benefits and challenges, again, the options that we looked at range significantly in costs as well as potential effectiveness. We looked at to find a balance and approach that would be flexible and reasonable in terms of smaller capital, maybe moderate operational impacts that are flexible over time. Staff also considered the fact that the south interface, and I'm going to start talking about, I'm going to shift from Park Lane Drive to the Pavilion parking lot. So some of the capital changes we looked at there, again, are expensive. We also know that there is a future seniors complex coming there that will change that, I guess, south interface of the Pavilion parking lot. We wouldn't want to sink a bunch of capital money into that with that interface changing in the next few years. Finally, staff feel it's important to keep the pavilion and the Kinsman Park as open, as inclusive as possible. We don't want it to be a closed-off area for everyone, again, to try to manage the behavior of a few. The options we looked at for the pavilion parking lot are fencing with a gate at the front roadway here, which would be, when we did consider that, would be quite difficult. There's a lot of installations already at the Park Lane Drive entrance to this building that would make it quite challenging to put any kind of gate in there, unfortunately, as well as expensive. We'd have to look at also opening and closing that gate for different events, again, challenging operationally. Road narrowing, going back to Park Lane Drive, may be a workable measure to reduce speed without affecting normal traffic. The figure provided shows the narrowing. It doesn't show the crosswalks we could do there. That might help as well, using those, again, using those biscuits to protect pedestrians as they get through those narrowing areas. We also looked at more video surveillance in the pavilion parking lot area. That was quite an expensive option as well. We would require kind of hardwiring from this building over to the pavilion. And you did also adopted a surveillance policy recently, which kind of outlines the challenging operational elements of that. If you do have cameras, you have to have a lot of video to look at. And again, an expensive option. And I'll speak again, I think in the pavilion area, again, increased kind of targeted enforcement activity might be the better way to look at this for council. It's scalable certain times a year, whether it's we have Halloween coming. We know sometimes that's a good time to do those kinds of things for some people. That might be a time where we do some focused enforcement. So in terms of organizational impacts, either capital changes on Park Lane Drive or enforcement or capital improvements in the pavilion parking lot, they all have operational and capital costs that will be increased. We could look at the Park Lane Drive narrowing as a bit of a pilot. That being said, oftentimes pilots, if we feel it's effective, that could become permanent over time. We could put capital projects that would make permanent curb bump outs. But again, I think we would look at it a pilot at first, again, to keep our costs lower in the beginning. So that kind of summarizes my talking points. I'll try to answer any questions, and Ethan is here as well. If you have any tough engineering ones I can't answer. CAO Skull want to add some elements as well, and of course, Staff Sergeant Wygosh as well. So thank you, and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley, then Councillor Montgomery.
Sure, I don't know about the rest of council, but I'm not interested in the traffic narrowing. I think the big concern from the delegation that came in was just the noise and the criminal activity going on at the pavilion. So the two things I would eventually like more information on is, what does this focused enforcement look like? What would it entail? How much would it cost? I want some direction from the policing. And then I wonder if it could be, if council could play around with the idea of a curfew. So I don't know if you can just have a targeted curfew in one area with some very large signage that says after dark, you know, don't park here. And then that would allow bylaw or police to better enforce that situation, that area.
Through the chair, I guess I can answer the second question. We do, I believe, have plans to put additional signage in the pavilion. I believe that's already on order. Is that correct, Donna? So that's still.
What is the curfew in the park? Yeah, so council could come up with something that would, I don't know, are we able to just target a certain spot and then hit it with a hammer?
I'd have to take that away to bring back.
Yeah, so that's something I would like more information on, is just, if that's the spot where the bad guys are hanging out, then let's quash that.
Okay, I'll take that away.
Councillor Montgomery, then Councillor.
Sure, but I think they were still going to answer my other question about policing.
Through the chair, if I might, I mean, I think we should have that discussion tonight. We have the staff sergeant here. I mean, basically, as the report says, we can do whatever council wants, and we can, you know, if it's going to be a matter of going in there because there's curfew signs and enforcing it, our municipal enforcement doesn't work after hours. So if you want to bring them in on overtime, it's a cost to do that. If you want the RCMP to go in there, we've given you the cost. The alternative that council has is, if this becomes a policing priority, the RCMP can not do something else with their regular shift and police this park, right? Like, It's $1,500 for 4 hours. But maybe I'll ask the staff sergeant to speak to that. But that is the information we have. If you want more information, please clarify that. But we want to discuss this tonight.
Maybe just before we do that, Councillor Wiley, and I think it ties into what you're asking, what is the current practice right now as far as having officers go through there? Like, we know weekends and summer nights are you're pretty much expecting there to be noise and stuff. So what do our members currently do in that area?
Good afternoon, Council. My comments are made through the chair to the rest of council for the duration of the evening. Our current practices are to spend as much time as we can on the problematic areas. However, we do have a wide variety of calls for service that are happening at any given time. So if we are facing a heavy burden of call volumes, and depending on what our resource levels look like for that particular shift, we're going to be focusing on the most impactful calls for service. Those are typically crimes against persons, property crimes that we're looking after, and then we're obviously always on the lookout for aggressive driving habits and patterns. So if they're actively occupied with their primary focuses, which is the highest risk to public safety, then some of the other matters that you're looking at tonight, such as noise issues and litter being left behind, may be falling at a bit of a lower priority for that particular point in time. Patrols throughout the park are part of their regular duties when they do have the ability and time to do so, which is why there is the option of targeted enforcement, which would either come at a scalable cost, depending on how much we're doing for the targeted enforcement, to what degree are we focusing on the scale. So if we're looking at overall tackling of aggressive road driving habits throughout the entire town versus scaling down towards focusing on speeding on Park Lane Drive, which based on the data presented tonight does not appear to be a significant issue, or if we're focusing on activity around the park, the pavilion, and focusing on vehicle equipment regulations with specific vehicles. So if someone's removed their exhaust, if they don't have a muffler on the vehicle, we could be targeting enforcement in that area. Mr. Scoble correctly pointed out that if there is a change in policing priorities, then it's a matter of scaling back. What else are we doing in the community based on our set priorities that we're going to reduce to focus on this area? Our resources are finite, and we only have what we have to work with. So that would be, if we're looking at zero cost and shifting of our priorities, then we would have to reduce our services in other areas to focus in this area, whether it be on a long-term basis or temporary. I can tell you that we faced the same problems when I was the commander in Chestermere. We have with the lake there, it was a popular spot for a lot of people, not only from the city, but also from surrounding areas. Some ways we use to tackle that is park hours. When the park is closed, if there's specific times that the park is to be closed, when our members did patrols, if people were in the parks, they were told to leave because the park is simply closed. Most of the residents knew what that was, but people from out of town quickly found out that they moved along their way, and that seemed to be effective to some degree. There's always going to be places in communities where it's a congregation point and a place to hang out, which is what we want in our communities. However, we want to encourage good citizenship with not throwing your garbage out of the vehicle, creating excessive noise, or what we've been seeing for the past few weekends with our Pride crosswalk. So there are a number of different ways we can focus our activities. I think what it really comes down to is what our council's desires to have either an enhanced police presence or, shifting where we're going to be spending our time based on what our current activities are. I can tell you typically when we're shifting these activities, we still have to focus on our primary and urgent calls for service. What typically suffers is our community involvement and our enhanced policing activities to shift our time towards what it is that we're talking about tonight. As far as enhanced policing initiatives, again, it's scalable. We can direct it in whichever way that may be most effective. During these activities, if violations are issued, yes, there is some fine revenue that does come back, but it's not about the money, it's about the safety. So there are costs, there is some cost mitigation. However, we want to change the behaviors.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley again.
So park hours can work.
That's been my observation. If there's a particular point in time, if we're hearing from our residents that it's after 10 p.m., that's the most problematic, then perhaps implementing park hours, and it's a lot easier enforced. When we look at people being in the park areas, if they're open, that they're open to the public, they're for everyone to enjoy. Unfortunately, we can't be around all of the time to babysit or watch as sort of live surveillance in the parks. We just simply don't have the resources for that. However, if the problematic times are after 10 p.m. when there's not a lot of people moved around and you know, that's when the aggressive driving habits start, is when there's less likelihood of getting caught. There's fewer people around, and again, it's most impactful because people are either you know, tucking themselves in for a night or they're already in bed or they're sleeping. Another thing that may also help with those park hours is we have licensed establishments in very close proximity, and the town parking lot is a very convenient place to park. So that again may also lend some assistance for after hours activity.
Yeah, and essentially if you get called and there's a complaint there, you show up, you don't have to catch the crime in action. You can simply tell people to carry on because it's past the hours of the park.
Yes, that is one easy way that can help, and within the city of Chestermere was fairly impactful, especially after hours when the parks were closed. People just moved along. And just based on the layout of the parks, no different than Kinsman Park, it was very visible from all of the main thoroughfares. It was easy to pick out if someone was there.
Mark?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to answer Councillor Wiley's question about a curfew, we actually have an existing curfew within our community standards bylaw. It applies for any child under age of 15. That this says a 12:01 curfew is in effect till 5 a.m. Now, obviously, that doesn't impact drivers and things like that, but there is an existing provision in that bylaw.
Curfew is the wrong word. I think it's park hours is what I was trying to think.
Councillor Montgomery, and then Councillor Mitzner and Peterson.
Thank you. So I don't know that park hours are going to work. Based on my own observations, we would have to basically bar people from being in there at about 7 o'clock. That's when people start to congregate there. That's when people start doing like burnouts and donuts around the pavilion. I would personally like to see some sort of, I think it would be temporary, increased enforcement. I think if we just, you know, did a blitz where we just hit everybody that throws stuff out of their vehicle, we could hit them all with like extreme fines. That would probably take care of the littering for a bit. If we, you know, like people always kind of race coming out of the farmer's market parking lot, never mind getting onto Park Lane, just coming out of the farmer's market, running by the town office here, people race. It'd be pretty easy just to have somebody, you know, for an evening or, you know, couple of evenings just to catch people doing that. I think people would probably move somewhere else pretty quickly once we made it uncomfortable for them there if they're going to break the rules. As for the cost, I mean, like I would prefer, of course, to redirect resources if that's possible, but I think a little bit of extra cost is fine because, as I said, I think it could be temporary and it would probably solve the problem. I don't know that changing the hours is going to work, and I mean, there are legitimate groups that use it too. Thank you.
Is there an option to, during the summer months, which I imagine are the worst months, is there a price comparison as far as an additional 4-hour shift of bylaw officers through the summer months only? Would that be something that could be seen as more financially affordable?
Through the chair, so just one clarification point, if I might first. We do have a parks bylaw that, you know, it's closed from midnight to 5 a.m. You know, in terms of that, I mean, yes, that's possible. You know, we don't have shifts of municipal enforcement officers. Like you can't, you know, have them working excessive overtime hours regularly, right? I don't know, Mark, if you wanted to comment any more on that, but you know, we don't have shifts or rotations or extraneous amounts of municipal enforcement officers to do sustained overtime.
Yes, through the chair, exactly as CEO Scoble indicated, you know, our manpower from municipal enforcement standpoint is quite limited. You know, an extensive stretch of overtime would tax the department to provide other coverage throughout the day or to other activities. So as Staff Sergeant Wilgosh indicated, a collaborative effort between the RCMP and municipal enforcement would be ideal, just based on the numbers, but there are implications, whether it's to the RCMP manpower or our municipal enforcement staff.
Thank you. Councillor Mitzner, then Peterson.
I have two questions. What time is our noise bylaw? Is it 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock? I think it's 11 too.
This section of the, excuse me, through the chair, Councilor Mitchell, this section of the community standards bylaw does need some reworking, and it is our goal to bring forward. It does talk about noise at 11 p.m. as you indicated, but it is pretty vague and does need to be revised.
Okay, my next question is, could we not eliminate all motor vehicles going in and out of there with a similar system where in the city, you can't go, the bus can go one way, but you can't go the other way? There's something on the ground that'll destroy your tires. Kind of like those things you guys throw down on the highway.
It sounds like a lot of fun, but I think one of my engineering colleagues might be best to answer that.
I'm not an engineer, but I think you're talking about a bus trap. I don't think that'd be quite expensive. I don't know what the cost would be.
I'm just not sure. I mean, I'm familiar with the bus traps. I don't know if Ethan's got any more, but they're not really something you can just manipulate easy. They're kind of there as a permanent, so anybody.
No, but if they're permanent, do we really need, how parking is taken up there during the day? Do we really need that much parking? We could just eliminate it as a vehicle space.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, anything is possible, but I mean, there is a lot of event parking. I mean, your staff are parked there during business hours so as not to take away from park or town hall patrons. So I mean, when, if the parking lot's pretty full, is if the staff are parking in the main lot, right? So it was always meant to be for the residents first, for whether they're in town hall on business or using the park.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I really appreciate the idea of signage on the parking lot, separate from the park bylaw itself, signage to that parking lot that addresses the quality of life issues that we heard in this council chamber. They are significant. I've, like a few of the councillors here, I've lived here almost 40 years, and this is sort of the worst example I've seen of prolonged quality of life issue. So we need to address it. We just can't leave it. And so the first thing I think, having a family live on the west side of Chestermere on the lake, I remember when you brought that in, and it worked. Like it just made such a difference to the people who were living along there too. And so I agree with you. I think that having capacity to be able to just go in and go, time to leave, it's out, and so I think that that's useful. And I know I don't want to even think about dictating operational things to RCMP or to our own bylaw for that matter. And so I think that being able to do that increased time whenever it's available, under your jurisdiction, but also being able to report to those people. Like I think that our senior leadership team did a really good job of hearing them and entertaining them and their concerns and bringing them before council. But now we need to do follow-up. I think we owe that to those constituents. So to be able, I would love for them to be able to see this. I'd love for you to be able to meet with the person that was the leader of that delegation, and to be able to say, here's what we're doing, so that we can give evidence to the voice that we heard before us of a significant number of seniors whose quality of life have been hugely impacted by that. So I don't mind finding them if that's the only issue, but I do think that a combination of signage and some attention will be a deterrent, I hope.
Yeah, just to follow up on your question there, Councillor Peterson, there's a way we can measure success. When I rolled out the Enhanced Road Safety Initiative in Chestermere, that formed part of my quarterly reporting. So I was able to account for what kind of violations were issued, what percentage of those people were residents versus non-residents, because that was a concern, particularly when the 80 zone was implemented on Highway 1 through Chestermere. And I guess part of that can form part of, I guess, a public satisfaction survey, or at least a survey which may contain some anecdotal opinion, but if people are noticing that the noise is less, that they're enjoying their property a lot more, we're seeing fewer burnout marks in town, perhaps that despite our best efforts, if we're rolling out the same number of enhanced shifts, but we're seeing fewer and fewer interactions despite our best efforts, those are observations that we can take into account and report back to council on. I think it's just a matter of focusing on what will be our mandate, what will our focus be, to what scale will degree, whether we're covering the entire town or we're focusing just purely on the park.
I appreciate everything that you've said and the approach that you and Jamie have brought forward, because I think that part of ensuring quality of life is knowing that you're heard and knowing that people are trying to mitigate the circumstance around the issue. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Councillor Langmaid and then Councillor Wiley.
Thank you very much. I like what I'm hearing tonight. I like that we have some options in front of us to try and mitigate some of the concerns that are coming out, from the neighbors across the road from the town hall office there. I think my biggest concern, kind of specifically directed towards the pavilion, is I think giving it closing hours is a great idea, but I wonder where they will go. If they can't go there, where will they find another spot, and will we just kind of be moving the concern around town and addressing the concerns of one set of residents now, only to maybe create a set of concerns for another set of residents? I don't know how we address that, but it is just one concern I have, and it goes to kind of the longer comment. The bigger comment I have is like the long-term solution. I think to this problem is addressing the social needs of the youth in our community and giving them places they can go. It's very easy to say you can't go here, you can't go here, you can't go here. They're looking for a place to go. They're going to find a place, whether it's a place they're allowed or in most cases, maybe not. I would be interested to hear, if we do pursue increased patrols, if there happened to be a quiet night, maybe a suspiciously quiet night at the pavilion, would those increased patrols maybe pop around town and see if there's a gathering occurring elsewhere?
Certainly there is that flexibility to have whoever's working in an enhanced shift to be shifting focuses wherever that might be. I would expect them to ensure that they're increasing visibility across the community. Even just something as simple as driving with your car windows down on patrol, you can hear what's going on around town. So that's obviously going to be a focus where that is. I think in addition to these types of programs, it's not necessarily matter. I mean, there's a couple different ways that can be approached. There's a lot of discretion that the officer may have depending on the person that they're dealing with. At the end of the day, we want to change behavior. We want our residents to be able to enjoy the public property that is there, but not at the expense of others, and not to damage property and ruin our nice, beautiful spaces for others who want to enjoy them. Some options might be, if littering is a problem, if the person is tired of having fines, then perhaps they can pick garbage for a while. And they may think twice about doing it again, because it's not great to have to pick up the garbage yourself. It's a matter of appreciating the impact of what your actions have on others, not just the town staff and the people who have to work to clean up the mess, but it's the other residents who are trying to enjoy the same spaces. So we used to call that for a distracted driving, like an option 4 type of offense, where people who would catch operating while distracted driving. The alternative would be, and this was actually spearheaded by one of our traffic advisory NCOs in Airdrie, that he would set up a session. All those who participated in the option 4 type of process would sit through a session with a young woman who ended up suffering, or ended up becoming a paraplegic person as a result of a collision because of distracted driving. So again, to go through that educational session, to hear what the full impacts are, to see what those impacts are as a way of a diversionary measure. Otherwise, there are other alternatives, such as the fines and the points, which have lasting effects, particularly for young people, with the fine, the points, the increased insurance costs. That can certainly be a strong deterrent, but it's not always a one-size-fits-all. I can say that we have identified drivers who are responsible for doing burnouts on our Pride crosswalk. Fines have been issued, and certainly they're not very happy about it. That's a matter that we're still working on, and since the past 3 weekends that the Pride crosswalk has been there, there's been diminishing number of incidents that we've noticed throughout the weekend. So there has been some public attention on that as well. So there's a fine line and a point where we have enforcement, but we also have alternative measures that are there as well.
Thank you. Just before I go to Councillor Wiley, in my thinking, I'm leaning towards what Councillor Wiley was saying, and with the information from Mark, if our noise bylaw talks about 11 o'clock being the time that it should be quiet, that would be a good time to have people vacate the park, I would think, too. So I'd be leaning towards that kind of a thing. Councillor Wiley, then Montgomery.
Does anyone remember from when the delegates were here, is the problem in the town parking lot or in the pavilion parking lot? I think it was mostly the pavilion, right?
It used to be the town, and then
Right, but the pavilion's so tucked back there, right? The town parking lot is in a very visible corner with lots of traffic, but that pavilion parking lot, like Councillor Langmaid's worried about them moving somewhere else. There's a limited number of spaces that are that excellent for hiding into the darkness. So I'm strongly in favor of coming up with a pavilion parking lot hours, and the sign's nice and clear. If the seniors across the street complain about noise, the police can show up and just escort them along. If it's the same individuals over and over again, then there can be consequences. That I think is a really simple solution.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Mark, and then you wanted to weigh in on that one? Councillor Montgomery next.
Yes, if I can, Your Worship. Sorry, I misspoke. The actual nighttime, as per it's 10 o'clock, not 11. So my apologies there. Since the creation of since the build of the SMP, we've had obviously different parts of town where have been, as Councillor Montgomery indicated, where have been the hangouts. The old parking lot here was one part. The north side or the east side of the family center, the arena behind the youth center was another one. We've taken steps there with increased lighting and some other provisions to try to redirect that as a hangout. So there are instances, but as Councillor Langmaid indicated and Staff Sergeant Wilgosh, right? Like, we don't know where those situations are. They could rotate to private and public places as well. So we're challenged with that, but through different mechanisms, we can try to mediate some of those things.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. So I guess, like, in my own experience, the problem isn't so much, it's not like they're sitting there listening to like loud music and like that's what's kind of bothering the residents. It's like, it's them doing, like I said, they tend to race up the side of like the town office building, and then they get to like where it hits Park Lane, and then they do like, as Jamie was saying, like, they really rev their engine, and then they kind of peel out, and so it's like loud from like vehicles basically coming and going, and then, like I said, like I've seen them doing like kind of like donuts around the pavilion, and this is all happening at like 7 p.m. So it's like it's not like we could unless we're gonna like I said, basically as soon as like the town employees are done, we just say, okay, no one's allowed to use it. But there's even like there's like a square dancing group that uses it on Tuesday nights. So I just that's why, like, so I don't know that necessarily park hours are going to help with this problem, because it's not like it's like 10 p.m. it's starting. It's like usually it's like winding down by like 10 p.m. or around there. So
if I might clarify, about 3 weeks ago, we called the RCMP for 3 vehicles making excessive noise and burnouts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday.
yeah, so it's not like it's like necessarily.
I just think economically wise, because there's a chance it's going to move to another parking lot, I think we want to keep this solution as simple as possible. I think it's at least worth trying pavilion hours, even if they begin as early as 5 p.m. Staff goes home, pavilion hours are up, and then you could have a simple thing like a park pass for a user group that rents it once a week, like the square dancing group. I think keep this as simple as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson.
I agree with the simplicity process, but when I remember back to the seniors being here, I think their issue was not being able to sleep at night, not being able to visit in late evening, not being able to sit outside on their patios after dark because of the noise, and mostly related to most recently. So I do think, that, as people have noted, that's not the only time that the issues have arisen, but the problematic time that's impacting quality of life. And you could confirm this with the gentleman that came here as a delegation, but in my recollection, it was late at night that it happened.
Councilor Montgomery.
Thank you. I just want to also point out that it's not necessarily a bad thing if these people do move somewhere else in the community. If it's like away from homes where people can be disturbed, then like who cares? So I don't think we should see it as a problem if they, move somewhere else. That's probably a good thing. Where they move to obviously matters, but if they move somewhere where it's a problem, then we could just, kind of deal with it that way. Or if we want to be proactive, we could actually come up with a place that we recommend they go to. That's not going to be a problem. And then that way, at least, we're kind of giving them an option. Thank you.
So where did we land? What are our next steps? Obviously, we want to be able to tell these residents that there's some sort of a plan in the works. Do you need some more direction, administration? Or a motion next week, or?
Well, I've heard different things, but I think what I've heard repeating is that we're going to put up a sign.
Yeah,
far as
maybe I could
hours.
get legislation to help me write a motion for park hours in the pavilion.
But there's no expectation of council to add resources. I want to be clear about that. Is that what I'm hearing tonight?
Yeah, I think so.
At this time, I wouldn't be ready to add resources. I would like to see how the not park hours, pavilion hours work. So I'd like legislation to write up a motion for me for whatever's convenient next week for pavilion hours, and we can debate the times that would be next week.
Okay.
Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you. So I am hearing consensus on some sort of consensus on the signage and operational hours at the pavilion parking lot, but it doesn't seem like we've addressed speed and vehicle noise concerns on Park Lane Drive. Is that something that there's just not appetite for right now? That is something that I remember being mentioned by the group that came to speak to us, was the speeding vehicles along Park Lane Drive and the noise that they create.
Councillor Wiley, or is there like?
Sure, so I don't have an appetite
guess-
for that. I think that problem becomes a lot less once the pavilion is no longer a problem. I know that residents from different streets have had problems about speeding and racing, and if we were to put in road narrowing in every one. So for example, Centennial Drive was the last one that we debated, and we didn't end up moving forward on that at all. So I think it's really important that we maybe just tackle one thing at a time. Let's try just the pavilion and see if that makes the difference for the speeding on Park Lane Drive. That's my preference.
Councillor Peterson.
I think
Councillor-
winter will beat us.
Pardon me? Sorry, Councillor Langmaid?
I think winter will answer that question for us, given that it's October, and I think people's desire to congregate outdoors goes down quite steeply as the snow flies. So this might be something that we learn more about in springtime then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson, then Montgomery.
Thank you. Just relevant to Councillor Langmaid's point about the traffic, I think that what we can communicate to that delegation of seniors, as per the work that our administration has done, is that the speed is not an issue. And so they've determined that through the study. So we have data, and I think they'll appreciate hearing that. Doesn't impact the loud rapping mufflers, but the speed thing, I think they'll be happy to hear about that.
Councillor Montgomery.
Yeah, I think that the pavilion issue and the speeding / noise from vehicles are probably two separate issues, actually. Just on my own observation, I've seen people that are not, coming, into or out of the pavilion that are definitely causing noise problems along there. And as was mentioned by the contingent that came, and I saw it myself, I think it's been on 2 separate occasions. People have crashed through that stucco wall that acts as a barrier between some of those residences on that, like where that curve is. And that, I believe, those predate the town office construction even. So, I'm sure there will be some effect on the pavilion issue by, if we say nobody can go in there, after 5 o'clock. But that's, I would recommend, and I would personally, even though I don't like spending extra money, I think if we actually want to solve this problem, we should probably consider some sort of enhanced enforcement along Park Lane, just even temporarily, just to give people the message that we do care about how they drive on this road. Thank you.
So have we landed on anything to?
So Councillor Montgomery, would you like legislation to write up a motion for the same week that mine comes forward, just asking for enhanced police presence on Park Lane Drive and Pavilion, and then we can debate it next time?
Kara.
Could I maybe just ask a clarifying question to Councillor Wiley about bringing this back? So I just reviewed the Parks bylaw again, and so it does define actually the parking lot that's adjoining as well as also being those hours that are relevant. So would you be comfortable with us at least starting with the current hours that are in the bylaw and putting signs up regarding that? Or would you like to bring the Parks bylaw back? And I would recommend to a future committee of the whole to have a deeper conversation.
What are the park hours?
12 a.m. to 5.
The pavilion needs to be less than that. They shouldn't be able to access it till midnight.
Are you comfortable with us maybe then arranging to bring the bylaw back to a committee of the whole? That would be my recommendation, so you can have that deeper conversation.
I'd appreciate that.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Montgomery?
Yeah, if Ledge Services could help with something to do with enhanced enforcement, either along Park Lane and the Pavilion, or just Park Lane, that'd be awesome, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Staff Sergeant Wilgosh. Much appreciated. We move now to 6.3, Seniors Property Tax Rebate Program.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just before one of the staff here presents here, I'd like to introduce our new Community and Social Development, or FCSS Manager, Bud Brazier. Bud began the role in early August and has quickly adapted to this position. He's recently oversaw the town's Truth and Reconciliation events, as well as the raising of the Siksika flag at the SMB here. So as you indicated, he's here to speak tonight about the Seniors Property Tax Rebate Program.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for having me. I'm here this evening to present information to Council on the Senior Property Tax Rebate Program, Policy 5103, that aligns the affordability housing within the strategic priorities. Within your package, the request is to have revisions to the policy to include small wordsmithing throughout the policy, remove the annual income threshold section from the table, and to add verbiage to refer back to the Government of Alberta Special Needs Assistance for Seniors Income Thresholds. Excuse me. This will allow the policy to stay current and will not require future revisions. Please have a quick review of the policy, and as you can see through the red line document, there's some small changes throughout, and the larger change is removing annual income thresholds in the middle of our table and just referring back to the Government of Alberta Special Needs Assistance for Seniors Income. So some of the changes that we've made is section, under definitions, section 2.0, removing client. Section 2.4, changing homeowner to senior. That refers back to our client. Section 3, program eligibility, just a wordsmithing and spell check there. Section 3.1A, Again, it's wordsmithing, changing it to homeowner as one. Section 3.1B is now actually, instead of line 150, line 1500 in the taxation assessment. And then section 4, rebate amounts, changing that to income thresholds. And then section 4.1, the new verbiage to align back to the government's website, so we can refer to that threshold from year to year as opposed to the table that would be out of date. And then section 5.0, just the revisions of ages that were incorrectly aligned previously. And then 6.0, end of policy. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions? Councillor Wegener?
I just have one question. It's not really a question, it's more of a thing. Just looking at this here for the eligibility, it says line 1,500, but shouldn't that be line 15,000?
15,000. Okay, thank you. That's our mistake. I'll make that correction.
Thank you, Councillor Wegener. Councillor Wiley?
Does anyone have any idea how much this policy costs? How much rebate is given back each year through this seniors rebate policy?
Yeah, I have some statistics on that. So going back to 2019, it cost the town $19,400 and serviced 132 clients. 2020 was $14,150 and serviced 92 clients. 2021, $18,400 and serviced 117 clients. And then moving into 2022, $10,700, servicing 66 clients. And currently in this fiscal year, 2023, we're currently at $9,650 and servicing 61 clients to date.
Yeah, so this will be coming forward to council as a bylaw that not a bylaw, a policy that we'll have to vote on 3 readings, just one. My heart's really torn on this one. As councillors, we want everyone to be able to stay in their house. So this August, I met a family that was living on my street. They were renting a basement suite, 4 kids, and they couldn't afford rent in town anymore. And we have to understand part of rent is property tax. So part of the reason rents are high, I know, supply and demand, but also part of the reason rents are so high is that property tax is high. And so we bring in policies to help people stay in their homes and rents go up. So back to this family of 4, they can't afford rent anymore. They've decided as of September 1st, they're gonna move into a campground in a tent. And they're gonna see how long they can go in a tent in a campground before buying a trailer. I've checked in on them, they have a trailer now, but it took them until October. So we have to be so careful that as we pass policies, to help one segment of the population stay in their homes, it means that taxes are higher. And so everything that we add, whether it's a $20,000 rebate program, is a strain on individuals and families in this community. So when this policy comes back, I'm really gonna have to decide if I even want to rescind it or not. It's something that I think, again, you're taking money from one group and you're giving it to another.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Montgomery, and then Peterson.
Yeah, you're not wrong at all, Councillor Wiley. Something I've identified in the past is the system that we have now. We do actually, like the federal government and provincial government focuses a fair amount of money towards keeping seniors in their homes, through like kind of home care and stuff like that, and other assistance. And I guess you could look at the cost of caring for those seniors in other facilities, and it's, I guess, debatable about where the savings would be and whose responsibility it is to manage care for people in their older age. But you're You're right. I feel like this program though is almost like, it's like a drop in a bucket basically. When it comes to like the kind of well, and like when you look at the fact that we tax kind of, working people and younger people to keep older people in their homes, which, keeps the housing market, artificially tight essentially because those seniors aren't moving out of those homes. And then, it just kind of creates this compounded issue basically where people have less money and the money, is being taken and, basically used against them almost. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think, this program going forward or not going forward is going to be the determining factor in that. One question I have for you is, to what do you attribute the kind of the fairly large differences in year to year on the uptake of the program?
Through the chair, that's a good question. We were doing some research last week on that, and we haven't really discovered why there's such a shift in applications from 2021 to 22. There's been quite a dramatic decrease, and we have no really contributing data to support an answer for that at this time. We can dig into it a little deeper. We sort of noticed that when we drew the numbers and why was there such a big decrease, but we haven't really had any data to support that kind of answer for that question. You're welcome.
Councillor Peterson and then Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I would just say that part of the reason that that this was initially introduced by a former council was on the understanding that seniors living below the threshold face challenges that other members of the population don't. They've lost capacity for earnability, or have limited capacity for earnability, which is what has placed them under that threshold. And so their capacity to earn has been impacted significantly. In terms of the amount of money seeming like a drop in the bucket, to seniors who are living under the threshold, it truly makes considerable differences. Many of our seniors have said that they utilize the $150 or the $200 that they actually plan and budget for that, and they save that money over a 2 and 3 year period of time, and they utilize it to purchase things that are not provided. So to top up the money they need to buy hearing aids or glasses or other care issues. And so it is a major contributor to their well-being over time, and something that they have greatly appreciated. I have speculated when I looked at the numbers and saw that the downward trend in that numbers. It correlates to what we saw in homeless populations. So over COVID, we saw a significant increase in seniors being homeless, large numbers of seniors being homeless, and in our local shelter, they were making up a considerable portion on any given quarter. Between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population in our homeless shelter were actually seniors. So Councillor Wiley's comment on the sadness around that is compounded when people have children, or when they're old and they have no capacity to, and they have health issues. This is a program that I support. It's a small amount to the taxpayer, and it has a big impact on the livelihoods and the quality of life of the seniors who are under the threshold who receive that. And we don't tax younger people to keep older people in their homes. That's a misnomer. These older people have paid lifetime of taxes to keep younger people in school and in other subsidized health care and all the things that a community who's based on in a social democracy utilizes. So I am very much still in favor of this program. I appreciate the changes that have been brought to it, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to recognize Councillor Peterson's comments, because I do recognize just how much a $100 or $150 or $200 difference in a budget can make to someone who is low income. But I struggle with it being focused directly on seniors. It's not that seniors don't need the support; they do. It's that there are, as we go into tough times, there are many people in our community that could use that same support, and who $100 or $200 would make a huge difference in their budget. So I do struggle with it being focused on one demographic, just because there are many reasons why someone might not be able to work for a certain amount of time. Maybe childcare is unaffordable. You know, maybe you have a bunch of kids and you can't afford child. You know, maybe you're injured. Maybe you have a partner who's going through major illness. There's always many reasons why income might go down permanently, or even temporarily. I'd be interested to know kind of some numbers around if we did expand this. I'm looking at expanding at this point. You know, if we were to open this up to more people somehow, I don't know how that would look, but kind of what that cost impact might be and I'm specifically looking at the really, really tough situations. Would that be difficult information to gather? Like, what would if we went for really, the similar bar across the board?
Mark.
Through the chair, Councillor Langmaid, that is very difficult to ascertain, right? We don't have the incomes necessarily for everybody who may apply for a program, right? We just don't know that's out there. Obviously, there are provincial funding available to low-income individuals, and that stuff is confidential, so we don't have access to that necessarily. So we would have to put a call out to our current clientele to gauge their interests, or in some capacity to figure out what that income threshold is and what that rebate is. This policy is existing, as Councillor Peterson indicated, from 2019. We were hoping just to make some edits to it and obviously bring it back for revisions that have existed over time. But if it needs to be expanded, I think we'd have to pay a little bit lengthy of a process for that.
I'm not that. Sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
I was just going to say, if it does become an expanded one, it would become a real budgetary issue too, as far as that goes. Did you have anything else on that, Councillor Langmaid?
No, just yeah. I think I've said everything there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Did you have anything?
Well, no, it sounds like it's not the will of council to expand it at this time, so I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Bud, for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
But if I might make a small request, would you mind turning around and facing the camera so that I can put a face to your name? You have a very beautiful back of your head. Hello, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, at this time in the meeting at 9:44 p.m., I would move.
And that it's 9:45.
You are brilliant. So I would make a motion that we extend the meeting to 10:30. Your Worship.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor?
And then at 10:45, Your Worship, I'd move we go in camera.